You're listening to Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Leia. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Logan Cheesa today. He's an individual who's currently collaborating with Mr. Todd Standing on some different Bigfoot projects. We'll be definitely hearing about that tonight. But how are you doing today, Logan?
I'm doing great.
Awesome. I'm glad that you were able to come on the show and talk about your history with Sasquatch over the years. And I'd love to actually start with that. What was it that first got you involved in this wild community and being involved with such a high-level individual such as Todd?
It's not too complex of a story. I think I started off really getting into Bigfoot, listening to old school AM radio, coast to coast. I know a lot of people may or may have not started that way. So I always really enjoyed listening to Bigfoot stuff. Didn't really get too much into the documentaries or finding Bigfoot when I was a little bit younger, just because it didn't really seem to ever produce anything. So I always just love listening to people's accounts of Bigfoot or researchers that are getting into the science. So this is a side passion of mine for probably the last 10 years. And then, after that, like I said, this is before I even started listening to the podcast. I think it was about 2019. I got late into the podcast world. I don't know why. I just always listened to Ghost when I had a second to do something. And I heard Todd Standing on there. He was talking to the host at the time. I think it was George Knapp. And he was giving some detailed accounts and some, from an outsider's look, kind of fantastical stories, and ended it with a call to, if you don't believe me, I'll take you out and show you the thing. And I've never really heard anyone give that, call to action. And I was like, who is this guy? I don't understand I've never heard of him. I've never heard of his documentary. And I've got 3 kids. I don't have a lot of time to watch a lot of TV. So I found a documentary, watched it twice, and I was like, this is, if it's legitimate, it's amazing. And how come nobody's really talking about this? And I think a lot of people were. It's just behind the ball a little bit, and a lot of people were dismissive and apprehensive and all the above. But I know after getting to know Todd, he's been around the Bigfoot world for a really long time. So just behind the 8 ball on my side. So I was like, if I'm going to go out and really get into this subject, I want to go out with someone that claims they have activity. I want someone that's as much as an expert as they can be. Decided to reach out to him, and it took months to get a follow-up because he's a busy guy, and he finally got back to me, and we chatted, and the discovery of Bigfoot kind of started from there.
Fascinating. I'm just curious, being a coast-to-coast fan, and I don't get to talk to many of those. Usually people will bring up something else like In Search Of or Monster Quest or something like that. But did you have a favorite episode from all those years of listening to the program?
I don't know if I can think of a favorite. I feel like I heard the guy from does the other Bigfoot podcast on there, Wes. I feel like I heard him on Coast to Coast because his story, when I later heard it in the 5 years down the road, I felt like he came on Coast to Coast and told that story already. So that one kind of rings a bell off the top of my head, but I don't know. I just always enjoyed listening to it. There wasn't anyone that really stood out, but I always found it like so fascinating how there could be this people in the woods that we haven't really truly discovered, at least in this day and age, we haven't.
Absolutely. You know, I listened to a few episodes. My favorite Bigfoot episode on that show is definitely Bugs, the Texas hunter, and Robert W. Morgan, and how he had the buried bodies down there, and allegedly Art had the map how to find them, but he lost the map in a move of his studio or home. So it's a wild interview, but if listeners haven't found that before, you can find it on YouTube, I think. But so you get introduced to Todd through Coast to Coast, which is really cool. And then you say, hey, let's go for it. It takes a few months. And then you get up there in Todd's area.
Yeah. So our first time out, kind of expedition-wise, with Todd was September of 2021. So I was out there for 7 days with him, it was me, Todd, and another Canadian from a town called Red Deer. And yeah, that was my first. I talked to Todd on the phone because he likes to vet people, because he wants people that are really into the subject and not just the wrong type of people that are there not to have an experience. I'll just put it that way. So he looks for the right mentality in a sense and kind of weeds out some of the people that aren't really real, or because there is an expense to it. And that's where he makes some of his living, is taking people out and trying to show them. You can imagine spending a week away from your family it's time, it's money, it's energy. So he wants the right type of person out there with him. Yeah, back in September 21, I went out there and I had, I'd say the first time, 3 to 4 different experiences out there the very first go around, which were, from my standpoint, I was amazed by it because I didn't really know what to expect. I'd gone through his footage and tried to do the human thing of debunking and trying to find as much stuff on Google that I could. And, you know, all I could find really was a lot of conjecture, and there wasn't a lot of real, okay, how did he actually get this footage? There was a lot of weird accusations of like robotics and these Muppets, and I was more or less, you know, I don't really see that. So I wanted to get to know Todd as a person, and then I also wanted to see what evidence he had and go out into the woods with him and have, you know, be open-minded and have an experience. And if anything, it's in the British Columbia, Canada, so it was a beautiful area. You know, to me, getting out in the woods is, I like to get out. I love the fresh air. I love the country. So even if it was going to produce nothing, I was going to be happy with it from my standpoint. But it produced something, and it keeps producing things for me. I'd say it was the second day there. We didn't get there till about 9 o'clock at night, and it was dark outside. And I didn't know what to expect. It's a good 4 hours out into the mountains. It really is remote there. There's no cell phone coverage. There's no power. There's no anything. It's basically in a mountain range in the space in between Radium, and if you want to give it like a map view, between Radium Hot Springs and like Banff. And there's a river that goes down the middle there. And if you get up high enough, you can see both mountain ranges. So, you know, that next day we were out and he was showing us, basically started with footprints. Like, I can't remember the exact time frame, but these Bigfoot had left where there's like this hill probably 75 to 100 yards away from his main base camp. And they had left these, I can't remember the exact length, but they were anywhere from probably 16 inches to 18 inches long footprints that were going up basically it's a bounce back moss going up this hill. So eventually those footprints went away, but they were pretty interesting to look at from the first timer that had never been and actually seen a Bigfoot footprint. It was pretty convincing. So they led him up this hill. Like I said, I can't remember the exact time frame, 6 months to a year in somewhere in there. So he had started put in his gifting apples up on this kind of this elevated hill and would climb this tree, put them about anywhere from 12 to 15 feet in the air, anywhere from 4 apples to 15 apples at a time, right? So he was showing us this area, and I got on his shoulders, and Todd's about 6'3", and he's a strong guy who he prides himself in trying to be fit. So I got on his shoulders and put all these apples up, and he was just showing the lay of the land, and he said, well, I usually will make a call when I put the apple gifting out, and he was going through his theories about these calls, and he was saying he didn't really think they were like wood knocks. He thought they were more of a rock knock because he just didn't see how you could produce such a large sound with a wood on wood. And some of his stuff has remained true, and some of his opinions have changed. It could be a rock knock from his opinion now, or it could be them making the sound with their mouth, like a large click with their tongue, or I wouldn't really know how they did it, but that's the secondary stance that I think he takes now. But so he asked Craig, the guy I was with, to pick up a rock and hit this gifting tree with it. And so he said, hit it as hard as you can. It's going to hurt your hand. It'll make a large sound, and we'll wait for a response, right? So Craig picks up the rock about the size of his hand, because it's the Rocky Mountains, so there's some random rocks laying here and there. And he picked it up and hits it, and we're sitting there waiting for about 30 to 40 seconds, and we get this huge response back, and it's about somewhere between 11 and 11:30 a.m. in the morning Mountain Time. And we make a response, and the response we get back is like 4 to 5 times louder. If I could have recorded it, I could have told you it was just so booming. Like, I couldn't understand how something could make such a large sound. And I could tell directionally which way it came from. It was northwest of the main campsite on the other side of his camping trailer. And it was just like, what? Seriously, we're already getting interactions here? I was amazed with it, to be honest. Post that, we did go and try to, like, whenever we hear sounds and whenever he hears sounds, he tried to look for evidence of that sound. We waited a little bit because we wanted to give him space, but we did end up going and finding tracks that were going up the other side of this other ridge where that sound came from. And then there was a rock that was dislodged from this kind of ridge. I don't know if that's what made the sound, but there you could clearly see like a rock that was taken out of the ground and placed about 15 feet higher. And you can tell when you're out in the woods that what looks fresh and what doesn't. It looked fairly recent, so it was pretty impressive to find that. And I think we did a video reenactment on his channel for it, and this would have been like sometime in 2021. But yeah, that was like the first moment I was like, maybe this is all legitimate. I still didn't really know Todd that well, but all the stuff he was showing me was just really impressing me. And if you just have to go out there, there's not people running out in the woods making sounds there. It's just so remote, and it's not feasible. It's like 100% not feasible for him to have anyone out there. So that's what started it going there. But it was pretty memorable having that first experience.
Yeah, that is quite a way to start out. And from what I've heard, it's pretty hard to get to that area. Like, it takes a pretty extended period of time to get just to the research area.
Yeah, it takes about somewhere between 3.5 to 4 hours from where you fly into, which is Calgary, Alberta. So it's still a distance to travel there and actually get there, and it's pretty much way backcountry. There's nobody there.
Gotcha. Probably going out on the equivalent of Forest Service roads at the end, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's an old Forest Service road. There's some old forestry trails that we take back there that haven't been really logged in probably 80 years. So you can still see some of the trails they made, but you can tell that they haven't been there for 75, 80 years. They're real old. And it's right on the cut line of a national forest out there. So you can tell where the old growth forest starts and the new growth where they cut 80 years ago starts, because it just looks completely different when you pass that imaginary line.
You mentioned gifting the apples, and those have been seen in the documentary as well. Has he ever used anything else besides apples in a gifting situation?
I think he's tried other types of fruit. And I think one of the expeditioners actually brought like a watermelon out there at one point, like that, and just put it out there on a stump. The problem with it is that's bear country, so anything you put out there that can go bad or has a potential for a bear to get it or search it out is kind of, it's a little dangerous and a little irresponsible. So he really likes apples just because they stay good for a long time out there. And he hasn't really had a lot of success in talking with them with other types of fruit. I think he put out power bars with Survivor Man. I think that was more Survivor Man's doing than his. But I think his gift of choice is apples just because of how long they stay. And it's easy to go out and replace them if a bird or a squirrel gets to them. Just pull them down, stick a new one up.
Sure. You mentioned that there are also bears in the area. What other predators do you guys have to be aware of while you're out in this remote area, in addition potentially to Bigfoot?
It's brown bears, black bears, mountain lions, wolves. Those are the main ones. Really, it's the bears and the mountain lions that are the ones that we're more wary of. Because most of the bears out there are very much wild, like they don't see a lot of humans. Those are the ones that are, we try to stay away and make not a lot of scent. And the way he cooks meals is very smart as far as everything is pre-made and we burn it all in the fire. He's very cognizant of being safe and having people safe out there because he's been through a couple different bears that have come up on him and had to take care of himself. So he's very cognizant of that. And there are just mountain lions out there. The wolves are a little less dangerous just because most wolves they're not really interested in humans unless you try to feed them, and then that's not a good idea because then they will kill you. So he's a bit of a wilderness expert tracker. He's been out there and done it all for the last 20 years, and he's real integrated into a bunch of different Indian tribes that he's worked with. And like his mentor was an Indian elder that taught him a whole lot of stuff about a whole lot of different things. So he takes a lot of that knowledge base and tries to teach some of it. And he's real into ecology and the plants and the things that grow there and what the bears would eat and where they'd go. And he knows all about basically just how the animals move out there, the seasons, and he uses that in the aspect of the sense of Bigfoot as well, what they would eat, what they would track, what they would consume, like what kind of prey they would do. As far as, honestly, not being from the area, it's really informative and good to learn about a bunch of that stuff just because you don't really think through that all when you're armchair quarterbacking Bigfoot, right? So
right.
He puts a lot of effort into it.
Absolutely. There's a question that just came to mind. You have those shots in Todd's documentary that everyone thinks about, the shots where you see the face of the Sasquatch a few times, right? And I myself have had an interview where a gentleman from Oregon, from the Willamette National Forest area, actually, he described what he saw as being a face that looked very similar to one of those faces that Todd had in his documentary. Do you guys ever get contacts as well from people that have watched your documentary saying, I've also seen something that looks similar to that, or is it kind of few and far between?
I'm just now getting people reach out to me just because I'm getting more involved, but Todd definitely has had people reach out to him and say they've actually seen some of those Bigfoot, or they've seen similar ones that look very similar as far as facial features. There's a couple of people that have reached out to him that have actually seen some of the Bigfoot that he's had on his documentary and like gave descriptions that unless you have seen this Bigfoot that you wouldn't know otherwise. So he's gone into some details about scarring and some other scars that some of these Bigfoot have on them. And when people call him and say, hey, I think I saw your Bigfoot, did it have this on its body? And that's post-validation for him that they probably did see the same one that he did. So he has stories like that, and I have no reason not to believe him because to me, Todd's been nothing but authentic. And I've spent about, I think in total, about 35 days out with him in the woods. So I've gotten to know him and his family and how he operates and how his belief system and his integrity. And honestly, I would recommend anyone go out with him just so you can prove it to yourself that he didn't hoax that footage because from my perspective, there is absolutely no way he could. He just doesn't have the skill sets. He doesn't have the will, and he really does have a lot of integrity when it comes to this. There's just no way he could have faked any of that footage. When you really start digging, finding out his life and what his background is and how much effort it would be to hoax something like that, it's just not in his wheelhouse to do. And that's just my opinion, my own investigation. I'm not trying to persuade people. I'm trying to tell people to do their own research and try to look into it on their own because that was really what I was trying to do. And that's the conclusion I've come to.
Absolutely. And since we are on the topic, there is just an interesting question I have. Why do you think that I've been in this topic for about 5 years? Why is the topic of Todd and his work such a polarizing, it's so polarizing to this community? It feels like if you're pro Todd or anti Todd, it feels like it's almost like a civil war type thing.
From my perspective and what I know of some of the, I don't know what you want to call them, top people in the BFRO, I think some of it is a bit of jealousy, to be fair. I think it's like a competition to them and they want to be the best and they want to have all the data and they want to say that they're checking all the boxes off. I think a lot of the people are they're just there for a bit of the fame, right? And I think there's a lot of good people out there too that really want the discovery to happen. But at the same time, they don't want Todd to be the one that did the discovery just because he can be a big personality and he's real straightforward with his findings and like what he's seen. And honestly, he's like, my hat's off to him because what he did to get a lot of that footage, like probably 99% of the people in the world would never do. They'd never go out into the wilderness by themselves for weeks at a time and just have that level of fear in them. I think that's why some of it is so convincing to me. And then a lot of these researchers, they want to go out on a Saturday and sit around a campfire and have a beer and they want Bigfoot to come to them, but that doesn't always work. So that's just a small perspective. I think there's lots of other reasons, but other than the fact that they just don't really want to dig into the evidence fully, they want to make snap judgments and say, well, it doesn't look real to me, but they don't want to try to prove how it's not real or how can you recreate it. I've never seen anyone recreate any of his footage in any form or fashion, really. Like no one's done it if it's so fake. You really start thinking about stuff and it doesn't add up. And I think vindication usually comes later in life with Bob Gedlin. I think most people, I'd say 75% of the people probably now believe that his footage is real. And 30 years ago, it's probably 15, 20%, right? So I think it just takes time.
That is very interesting. Myself, personally, I've talked to people on both sides. There are interesting arguments on either side. I've never talked to Todd directly or at all. So until maybe I get that chance, I'll be neutral on it as I like to talk to people directly. You also have other times that you've had interactions. Were there times when you were up in that area where you believe you got maybe a little bit closer to a Bigfoot or things got maybe a bit intense in the interactions?
Yeah, for sure. I can think of 3 because I've been out there with him. I call it 4.5 times because just one of those times I was really out there just to put equipment up and do some architectural work. But just to touch on it somewhat lightly, like that first expedition, we did one of the experiences I had is we went up this north logging trail about a mile in the dark. And again, these are things that most people don't do. And the guy that we were with was a bit of a adrenaline junkie. So he was like, man, let's go in the woods at night and let's wear some headlamps and let's ride these. We had these e-bikes, and we rode these e-bikes about a mile up this road, and it was 10:30 at night, mountain time, and the wildlife there are not used to silent bikes, and it's a little worrisome that we're gonna roll up on something and not know what we are. But we ended up stopping at this opening, I would call it, where there's a tree line and it opens up and you can see the mountains and you can see another ridge, so it's ridge line. And Todd did a call from the left side into the right side, and we stood and waited for about 60 seconds to see if we get a response back. And the response that we got back was it sounded like some giant being like pushing this tree over and throwing it. It was so loud, and it sounded half a mile away. And I just remember that moment and thought to myself, oh my God, there's nobody out here. Why would... And there was no wind, there's no anything. Why would anyone in their right mind think that sound came from a human in the middle of these mountain woods? Because it was just crazy to me. And it was further vindication on that first one, but it's fortuitous, but we think we found that tree that this Bigfoot went up. And I don't know if it was one or two, but it wasn't even a dead tree. It's probably tall, somewhere between 40 and 50 foot tree and you can see footprints going up this hillside and something going up it and just ripping this tree about 12 to 15 feet from the top and throwing it through another one. And you could see the evidence all over the ground, and you could tell that this tree actually flew through another tree. There's limbs hanging everywhere. And then you could see it on the ground. And so there was just all this really, I'd call it circumstantial damning evidence that kind of pointed us to, that was the response we got back of, hey, you're going to make sounds, we're going to make bigger sounds. So that was honestly, I know I can't prove that, but the evidence was all there. To me, I'm 98% sure that's what it was. There's always room for something else, but I'm 98% sure that's what happened, right? So that was the bigger thing that happened. But later on in another expedition, I had a few instances to where I'd say the major other two was one, me and two other expeditioners were following a sound that was going towards more of the old growth forest. And I kept making click sounds with my tongue because I can't really whistle. I don't really pride myself on whistling, and I can never been able to do it well. So I just went with my tongue a lot, right? Because that, to me, that's my form of communication. And I just kept getting these responses back from, it sounded like a tree just knocking. Like I'd do it twice, it would do it twice. I'd do it 3 times, it would do it 3 times. And the guys that I was with, they were 2 brothers, and they would whistle, and then they'd get like a single response back. And we followed this sound all the way to this, I call it like a grandpa tree out in this old growth forest. It's probably 2 to 3 feet in diameter and 100 feet tall. The branches didn't really start until about 60, 70 feet up. So it's just this humongous tree, and there was nothing rubbing against it. And actually I made a kind of a custom body cam for this expedition because I wanted to get more footage. And I actually did get a lot of this back and forth sound on my body cam, but the body cam was really meant for visual more than audio. So you can hear it, but it's not as good as it is in real life. But we followed this tree, and it just kept knocking at us. And I'm sitting below this tree with these other guys, and it's got to be some kind of weird knot in this tree somewhere tall, and it's like expanding and making this weird sound. And we're debating it, trying to go through justification. And while we're below this tree, it just we would be talking, and it would just go boom and knock at us, right? And I'm just like, I don't understand this. I've never heard a tree knock at me before. And we searched the area while we're hearing this, and there's some juvenile tracks around the area. There was one big 15-inch track that was pretty close to that tree. And it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was about 80, somewhere between probably 80 to 85 degrees because it was in July. And we're just sitting there. What do we do? Because Todd had actually left to go get gas because he needed to get gas so we could go up to this northern section about 30 miles north. And he didn't get gas on the way up there because there was a hail kind of storm and it disoriented us a little bit. He had actually left just to go get gas, and the closest gas station there is about 60 miles away. So we were exploring on our own and he wasn't there. And we're like, man, I don't know what to do with this. We sat under this tree. I was to the point where I was like, I wish I could climb this tree, but there's just no way. So we ended up leaving. And as we're leaving, knocked a final knock at us and we didn't hear it again. And we said, okay, we'll look up. Maybe that's some weird animal. Maybe that's a weird tree temperature. Maybe it's like the other guy said, his name was Dan. Maybe it was the tree expanding and making a weird sound. I really don't know. So when Todd ends up, we getting back, and I found another track on the way out in a kind of a different area. And I was telling him about this experience. And he's, what do you think trees knock at you? And he was going through the motions with us. There's no way. I've been in the woods for 20, 30 years, and the tree has never knocked at me continuously and made sounds at me. So from his standpoint, like he said we treat probably a more of a younger Sasquatch, or he was there just messing with us. We didn't really treat it like he was just sitting up there messing with us. And the other guys I was with, they were trying to do because eventually we got Starlink out there. So they were trying to get back in reach of this internet service that we have out there and do some research and see if they could find that reason for it. And they couldn't find a reason. Trust me, they did plenty of searches trying to figure it out. And we came to the conclusion that there was something up that tree that we just couldn't see, and it was knocking at us and just messing with us. Hindsight's 2020. I wish I would have stayed under there and done more with it. But when you think back at it, it's pretty amazing. Like, I do have evidence of it, and I do have the footprint pictures, and I do have the sound pictures from it. So that was a big ordeal. And then the next thing that really, I'd say it's one of those things that you can't really get out of your head, and it kind of changes you a bit going through it. So this was in the same expedition. I think it was July of 2023. So the whole time I was out there, I just wanted to get off by myself and spend a night in the woods on my own to see if I could have some decent, better interaction. Maybe being more secluded would draw up some more, just be more open to me. And every time I tried to get out and do that, like it would like rain that night, or I'd have some reason not to do it. So it was annoying me. So I was like, okay, fine. I'm just going to sleep outside pretty close to the campfire and just be out there alone. So that's what I did. I couldn't tell you what day of the week it is off the top of my head, but I stayed out there. It wasn't a rainy night. It was a starry night, decent weather. It gets cold out there at night, but it wasn't horrible. It's probably in the 50s in the middle of the summer. So I ended up staying out there, and it was probably 1:30, and the guy I was with named Dan, he wanted to just keep me company for as long as he could. And he liked to whittle wood, and he ended up falling asleep in the chair, just the camping chair about 5 feet from me. And I was sleeping by the fire, and I was in and out of it all night. And I noticed that he was there still, and I looked at my phone, and it was probably about 3:45. And I was like, he didn't even realize he fell asleep out here. I didn't want to bother him, so I just let him be. And then about 4:30, he gets up. I see him get up. He throws a log on the fire, says goodnight, and he goes inside. Later on, he tells me that the reason he got up, and this wasn't evident to me at the time, was he was hearing sounds behind him and it was freaking him out, right? So I was like, thanks for telling me, right? So I'm sitting there by the fire, it's 4:30, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to get some sleep. And it's really hard to sleep out there. It's pitch black, and you really only see the light of the fire. Everything around you is pitch black within 10 feet of the fire, and there's no sound out there. It's so eerie. There's no bug sounds, no sounds at all. It's just dead quiet. And so I don't know what time the sun comes up because I'm not used to mountain time. I'm used to central time because I'm from Texas, and I'm sitting there and I don't know what time it is, but I crack my eyes open and I can see some blue haze and I can tell it's about to be dawn. And I later on figure out that the sun comes out pretty early in the mountain time in July there. It's about 5:15 it comes up in the morning. So I didn't know that at the time. I was giving you a point of reference. But I'm sitting there and it's getting blue and I'm around the fire pit. It's like this picture of being like a donut around it where it's a hill on one side a little bit to where I'm sleeping towards with my back to this little hill, almost like a ditch. And I'm laying on my right side looking at the fire and I'm like, okay, the sun's coming up. Probably nothing going to happen. I can at least sleep for 2 or 3 hours and get some rest. And as I'm saying that in my head and I'm rolling over, I put my hands on my chest and roll over to my left where I'm going to angle on this donut hill. Is that how I would describe it? And all I hear is 2 footfalls jump backwards. From my perspective, it was 2 to 3 feet from my head, and it jumped backwards because I scared it because it didn't know I was going to move, and I just hear 2 feet land on the ground beside me, and I'm in my head, my heart's beating super fast, and I'm at a total disadvantage, and I can't really turn that direction without being super obvious because I'm slanted. And I'm trying to work up the courage to open my left eye because my right eye is cocked open. But unless you're in that moment, you don't really know what you're going to do because something's walking beside you and it's not supposed to be there. And you don't really know because you've never seen it or heard it before, like how they're going to react, or if they see you noticing that you're awake, like what are they going to do? So I'm running through those scenarios in my head. And so I get my heart rate to go down a little bit. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make sure that's what I heard. Probably about a minute to a half, I get my heart rate down and I'm like, I'm just going to listen, close my eyes and act like I'm asleep. And I slowly hear, in my opinion, this Bigfoot walking, like right foot, left foot, around my head. And I'm just like, oh man, it is here. I'm not dreaming. And I'm trying to get the courage because this is what I'm there for, to see this, to look in that direction. But at the same time, it's just so daunting because like I said, you're on your back and don't have a weapon really. I'm at a disadvantage. If I turn quickly and look and there's this thing looking at me, is it going to get mad? Is it going to kick me? Like I'm just trying to run through the scenarios the whole time and trying to slow my heart rate. And I finally get the courage. I'm like, okay, I'm going to roll towards the fire and then do a quick look over my shoulder and act like I'm still asleep. So it can have some like indication that I'm awake. So that's what I did. I rolled and looked over my shoulder and of course there's nothing there. Like it's completely gone. I have no idea where it went. Like it came in like a ninja, and the only reason I heard it is because it didn't know it was going to turn, and it left like a ninja, and it didn't leave anything in the substrate around me whatsoever. But I can still hear those footsteps walking around me, and I know for 100% fact that there was no one else out there but me, and in my opinion, this Bigfoot, because everyone else was in the trailer, and I could hear them snoring because they all snore like a symphony in there. So that was the start of why I started to put my project together, because if we actually did have cameras in base camp and we did have more technology out there, I think we would have definitely caught this Bigfoot staring at me sleeping.
That's an incredible experience to live through. You weren't in a tent, you were out in the open, correct?
Correct. I just had a sleeping bag on, a pillow below me. That was it.
Oh, man. Wow. I can't imagine living through that. And it's one of those weird things where no footprints as well. But stranger things have happened that I've had told to me and that I've read in different resources as well. After you lived through that, did that set you like you were full steam ahead, or were you a little bit more apprehensive of everything going on having lived through that?
It just drove me further, like, into the subject because, you know, I still hadn't seen one, and I still want to, even though that one was I think I got what I needed in that one. And yeah, I still really want to see that live Bigfoot have these Sasquatch come up on me and have more of a visual. So it just drove me forward. And Todd started talking to me about maybe we should put cameras in base camp. Like maybe they do come around here like all the time. I know there's a stigma around cameras and everything else, but from his perspective, he's been out there at that site at this point, it's probably been about 15 years. So if they don't really trust him by now, then they're never going to trust him. So he was like, let's just do it and see what kind of like activity we get. Let's see what we can draw up. Let's see if the stigma is correct or incorrect, because you hear nothing but, oh, they don't like cameras. They don't like cameras. But most people don't have this habituation area that they're in either. And I think a lot of people put up cameras and these trail cam cameras trying to be deceptive and like really sneaky. And I can say that if I was Bigfoot and someone was trying to be sneaky and deceptive, yeah, I probably wouldn't care for it much either. But so that's my thought. To put these cameras up with the intent of, hey, we're trying to further the discovery, not be like super sneaky with it. Like the ones we put up are super obvious. They're like clearly visible. They're sitting there. There's two different angles. And if they really wanted to, I gave them a way to not be on camera, right? It's not this triangulation of cameras. It's two cameras, one going south, one kind of going north, and they could actually get behind them if they wanted to, right? So that was my thought, is to go in that direction. Todd kind of approached and said, maybe we should. And I said, let me try to figure that out, because I'd like to put some contribution to this and try to do this. So this was around November. I started putting the idea together. Okay, maybe we should really think this through and bring this to everyone that really wants to see his area and wants to get into the research and wants to possibly see a Bigfoot on camera. Like, how can I actually get this to be like something that's better than just this closed loop system that only me and Todd can see? I want to bring it to everyone, so everyone that's really into the subject can have the opportunity to go out into the woods and see this area and just discover Bigfoot for themselves, in a sense, right? So that was my thought, and I can get into more of this project that I've been working on since last November and all that, if you want me to.
Yeah, I would love that, because it is an incredible project. You're really, if you think about it, you're the engineer that came up with the project, but also developer that put it all together, correct?
Yeah, I'm like I'd say 97% into it, and Todd's, okay, let's say 95%, because I've been leaning on him a bit for some of the power, but I basically designed it all and built it all and developed the app and put the whole system together and put all the right equipment together. And it's been a journey of love. How's that?
Absolutely. I think it would be good to start with, what's the elevator pitch for this project that you have set up? Because it's a pretty incredible project that you set up there.
Yeah, so I'd say the elevator pitches, the end all game is I'd love for it to be like never ending 24/7, right? So I've been having some problems with power systems to where it's been up and down, and I've had some forest fires. So some things are a little bit out of my control, but I basically have two really high end, they're 4K cameras, they're night vision, they're these huge tilt pan zoom cameras one's actually about 15 feet up a tree, the other one's on the side of one of the campers out there. But it's the ability to watch that live feed and from two different feeds whenever you want to just log in and look. Especially when we have expeditions out there seems to be a lot more activity and like post expedition. And I really want to see what happened out there when no one's there, right? Because you don't really know. We don't know what's going on. We've never really recorded. And that's what I've been doing, is building out everything that would need to be there to continuously record that entire environment off those two feeds. and then how to save those terabytes of data that get propagated every month, like how to retrieve it, how to analyze it, how to look at the data, how to look at the sound waves, how to look at basically the movement, any amplitude over 1,000. That's where I'm starting. So, and inside the app itself, you have the ability to watch, and then if you actually think you see something or think you hear something, you can hit a button and basically say what time it is based on the camera time and what did you see, and submit it, and it goes to a real-time database, and all that gets collected and reviewed, and eventually it's all going to be very much I call it, just because I'm an engineer, like event-driven architecture, to where everything is as close to real time as possible, to where, let's say we're having activity out there, someone that has this app would basically get a notification saying, hey, someone just saw a Bigfoot 5 minutes ago, or we're hearing noise, we're hearing howls, we heard a tree break, something to where people could actually look in live. And the more eyes on it, the better from my standpoint, because I want people to collaborate. All the video stuff that people report and all the stuff that I find, I'm trying to build this section inside the application to where I have been uploading videos to it, but eventually it'll just be in the app and not outside. I'm trying to do a little bit of marketing and just put it on Facebook and Instagram and a little bit of YouTube, but eventually it would all be this user-based community that's doing reportings and sightings. And I really want it to, this is like the proof of concept. I'd really love for it to grow and to build this system in other locations and work with other researchers and have this camera, I'd call it data analysis points in different areas and different locations in North America, wherever we can collaborate with people and build this network out to where you could watch, I don't know, from anywhere from 10 to 30 different feeds at once. And so that's my thought, and that's where I'm starting with these two. And I'm building the architecture on the back end to where it's not just user reported. Like, I'm trying to be new age with it and tech savvy with it, to where I'm building automation around sounds and movement, to where it basically sets it all out there for us, the people that are going to be involved in the app. And that where when it reports like amplitude up risings and movements, even if it's like a deer or an owl, right? Because you can't really know until you watch it. That's the hard part. That's why we need collaboration, because there's only so many hours a day that I have to review, like 3.5 terabytes of footage every month. So that's my thought. I'm building that out right now. It's a little bit manual automation, but I have found a whole lot of interesting things that have happened, interesting sounds, interesting movements, I can say that. And then it's a labor of love, because I'm pretty much the only developer on this. I'm going to eventually have it to where you can hit a button and request certain footage and just review it. Like, whenever you want to, it'll give you a hard link and you can go review it. But that's the important thing to me, is that there's before footage, there's after footage, there's so much analysis you can do that I haven't found any researcher really trying to attack it in that sense. But like I said, a lot of the hard part is trying to get the power, because I'm a reliability engineer, and it makes me mad when the power goes down because the solar is not good enough. Right now we're doing solar, and we just got this really nice remote generator in that we can turn on remotely from 1,200 miles away. So we're really trying to think outside the box on some of this power stuff and get it to where it's really reliable. It's just it's a work in progress. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. It's, you make an account, you do it. If you don't like it, I built it all with Apple and Google. It's called Discovering Bigfoot. So it's on both of those platforms. And, there's just a subscription fee. And I can tell you the fee is nowhere near what it cost me to actually build this all out. Really, it's just to recover the monthly cost because it does cost a lot monthly to run all this architecture. The whole thing is powered, as far as the internet goes, by Starlink, and we really had to up the bandwidth just to take the upload speed. So the Starlink itself is really pricey, to be honest. Even I know a lot of people use it now, but we're doing like the highest tier bandwidth possible so I can have the footage uploaded.
It's such a fascinating project, and I think that no matter what side you're on with what's going on up there, in 20, 30 years, when we look back to this time period, people are going to say it's one of the most just craziest projects that were done regarding Bigfoot in that time period of the 2020s, right? It's not just like you're having a cellular game cam, but you're integrating an app, so you're integrating people being able to access it. And it's so cool. I used to be a software engineer as well, so I get the way you think a little bit. At least I like to think so. I probably do. Have you ever thought of, is it written down how you set this up? Is the software, all that good stuff, available in a GitHub repository anywhere? Have you thought of that? Is it even a thing where, you may not want to have it all out there for other people to utilize?
I think eventually I'll make it just open source.
Yeah.
I do use GitLab to do all the code repo. It's private GitLab, but I do use GitLab to do all the coding, and then a lot of the architecture on the back end. It is proprietary a little bit because I didn't want to use, you can think of it as a cloud DVR, but not built with DVR software. Because I looked into a lot of that stuff and I didn't want to mess with it because it looked like a pain in my butt. Like I wanted to do it simplistic, and I wanted to use cloud providers to do a lot of the back-end architecture, right? I do have it all diagrammed out and I have it written out, and I'm hoping that if I get hit by a bus, someone could read it all and take over. I know it might take a little bit to back engineer some stuff that's not working, but I'm hoping something happened to me, someone could take over it. I do have a twin brother that is in the same kind of field as me, so I'm sure he could catch on and figure it out. But it's not this meta thing, or I'm not a super smart Google engineer. I'm just a regular guy that has an engineering background, and I really enjoy learning new things and enjoy automation and Python and writing serverless applications and functions and observability. I do a lot of observability when it comes to my job and building reliable things to actually measure. So it just works hand in hand with Bigfoot, in my opinion, because we're trying to measure how to find this being, and we need data. And this is like step one, let's collect data, right? I think there's a lot of data out there, but most people are keeping it to themselves, or it may be not as complicated as what I'm trying to do, but it's for people, right? I want people to get involved and help the discovery, and people that can't get out in the woods and are really into the topic. This is like step one towards that, in my opinion. So I'm open to criticism and collaboration, and hey, you do this. You ever thought of doing it this way or doing it this way? Like, I'm always listening to podcasts, trying to figure out like a good way to interact and put something up. I'm always trying to find a new end that would maybe draw them in, like a puzzle or the color blue or tennis balls. Every time I go out there, I do something different. It's fun to me, and I really enjoy doing it. And I'm really hoping that, some guy named John Doe Bill logs into this app, sees Bigfoot, reports it, and we'll name it after Bill, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not about the credit. I just want the discovery.
Oh, I'm right there with you, dude. Have you thought of maybe, and this is easier said than done, but integrating AI in a way so that there doesn't have to be an actual human individual that sees something on camera, but there could just be a notification. Hey, we saw something that is really big and someone should probably take a look at it.
So I have a lot of like Lambda serverless functions that I wrote that processes the video now. And this is within the last 30 days that I've tried to do some of this. And just because it's been such a hard time to try to parse through the data, I'll just put it that way. So it's basically using like computer vision and a lot of data science tool, like Python modules. So it's like a mini, it's not quite AI. Like I haven't taught a model to learn. It's not like an LLM or anything, but there's other services I could pump it into that are out there that are available that I could actually do that. I'm just trying to be a little bit custom with it at first, because what I've built already, it already finds all the amplitudes. It finds, eventually I'm going to have it to where it actually finds certain types of sound waves. And it already, I have some, I posted some stuff to Reddit where I said using tech to find Bigfoot, and I have the square boxes show up on the screen and it shows this owl come into picture and fly by, and it shows where it's moving before it goes there. So I have that in the background. It's just not fully automated like what you're saying. So that's why I'm trying to get to that. But at the same time, I'm one person, and at the same time, like I pay a lot for the softwares that are out there that are somewhat open source, somewhat not. And I could try to build some of that modeling on my own. It just takes time. So I'm open to people that are really good engineers that would want to help do some of it, because the more the merrier, from my opinion. Like if people are really good at doing some of the AI stuff, because I'm still in my infancy on some of those aspects.
So what I'm hearing is if listeners are software developers or guys that are involved with crazy AI stuff, to reach out to Logan. We'll probably get that info at the end of the episode. And maybe there could be a whole little hackathon that goes on and really get this nailed down. Who knows?
Yeah, I could give you endpoints that points to hours of footage, and you can help me to do some development work on how to get it more suited and really crisp. Because when the trees blow hard, that could, you really have to train it to where because there's wind up there sometimes and you'll see the trees moving left to right, and that kind of gives a false positive. So you really have to train it for certain movements, and it's possible. It's not unachievable. It just takes time.
It's fascinating. It's my dream that someday your system is running in Area X or somewhere nearby in Southeast Oklahoma or in Northern California or Oregon, just all over the place. And it's the thing that really locks it in. And I know there's probably other stuff to get done before that, but man, that would just be so cool, Logan, if that ended up being the case.
I would love that. I'd love to just have 2 or 3 more people to collaborate with and put a system up where we have more. This has only been live basically since middle of July. So it hasn't really been that much up and that much data yet. So I don't know. I think it has a lot of unlimited application possibilities from my standpoint. That's why I've been really trying to get it more reliable. It really does irk me that the system goes down sometimes. And it has been going down because the wattage from these 500,000 watt solar panels do not produce enough energy for whatever reason. Like, it is so mind boggling the amount of work we put in to try to get solar to be more stable when it is clearly not what it's cracked up to be, in my opinion.
It sounds like definite work in progress, but it also sounds like it's worth all the potential frustration that goes into it, for sure. Logan, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you tonight. Did you have any final closing thoughts / remind people how they can get in touch with you if they're an engineer, or how they can also get set up with this application to keep an eye on what's going up in Todd's area?
So the app's called just Discovering Bigfoot. You can find it on Apple Store, the Google Store. It's out there. I try to make it pretty simple. So if people, I try to make it to where it's not a lot of people. You have to really verify you have a real email and stuff, because I don't need malicious people out there just goofing around. But other than that, it's out there. And then if you want to get a hold of me, my contact email is on the app itself, but it's contact@bigfootlivestream.org. You can just send me an email. I do have a Facebook page and a Instagram page where I'm putting videos out there. So you can find me. Again, there's links on the app to that, so you don't have to search all up. It's all on the app. But I'm out there in the social media world, even though that's not really my forte, right? It's really more to let people know I'm alive than anything. My wife's a lot better marketer than I am. Let's put it that way. But yeah, that's how you get a hold of me. And I'm usually, if you do need to get a hold of Todd or something, I talk to him all the time. And I do have some links to some of his YouTube stuff inside the app as well. He's the backbone of the project, because this is really his habituation site.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show again. And it'll be extremely interesting to check back in with you maybe in a few years to see where this project has gone. But thank you.
Yep. Great talking with you.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.